All right, welcome everybody to another session of Developer Hours. In this session, we are going to be talking about a really fun topic that is relatively new with WordPress 6.5, and that's how you can create dynamic content using the block bindings API and custom fields. Justin Tadlock is going to be our presenter today, and I'll let him introduce himself in a second. My name is Nick Diego, and I'm a full-time sponsored contributor by Automatic to work on WordPress. And Justin, how about yourself?
I'm also a full-time contributor sponsored by Automatic. Nick and I are teammates and for on the developer relations team. So hi.
Yep. So one of the other things I wanted to do before Justin has a lot to cover today, so I want to give him as much time as possible. But one of the things I wanted to share is Developer Hours is an event series that we try and do twice a month. So the next event is going to be on May, I'm getting my months wrong, May 14th. It is going to be about how you can create alternative user interfaces than perhaps what you've used in the past, which would be meta boxes. So we're going to have a fun presentation on alternatives to meta boxes, and also some discussion about why you might want to be transitioning away from meta boxes. So if you're interested in attending the next session, I put the link in the chat. And then the final thing that I wanted to share is last week, there was a really great hallway hangout. If you never attended a hallway hangout, they're like more of discussion-oriented events, whereas developer hours are more presentation-oriented. We present on a topic, where hallway hangouts is a bit more of a discussion. And this hallway hangout was about what's coming next in Gutenberg. So I'm going to post a link to that as well. So there's a great recap post, which is what the link goes to. And actually, if you're watching this recording after the fact, the links will be in the show notes. But the recap includes the full recording of the event, as well as some highlights around what the information that was shared. And it's a lot of cool stuff that's going to be coming in WordPress 6.6 and is currently being worked on in the Gutenberg plugin. So I talked about developer hours and hallway hangouts. These are kind of the two event series that are run by WordPress contributors like ourselves. And so keep an eye out for them. Hallway hangouts usually happen once or twice a month, and so do developer hours. And these are great sessions to kind of learn about what's coming up in WordPress. Or like today, we're going to be talking about a feature that came out in WordPress 6.5, but how you can use it in your own projects. So with that, I will give Justin the floor to talk about block bindings and custom fields.
All right. I'm just kind of looking at our poll here, and I see we have a lot of people. This is the first time they are learning about block bindings. I'll try to focus on the specifics of the API as much as I can. In this session, I wanted to talk about primarily how we take block bindings and go beyond that by integrating them with other systems in WordPress. But just based on the poll, I'm seeing we have 42% of the respondents are this is their first time. So feel free to pop in the chat with questions as I work through this if I'm going over something a little too fast. So this session is primarily about learning how to what you might call bind or connect custom data sources to a block. So imagine you wanted to do something like you have an image block, but you don't want to have a static URL for that image. Maybe it's something dynamic that's pulled from custom fields. Maybe it's something that's stored in a theme option or a plugin option, or even you're pulling something from Pexels or Unsplash, like a third-party API that you have a dynamic image, and you can't do that with the default image block out of the box. The only before WordPress 6.5, the only way to actually do those dynamic things with an image would have been to build a custom block. but that's a lot of work, and it's a whole bunch of extra code that's being loaded on the page in the editor. So that the block bindings API, what it allows you to do is kind of hook into uh, the one of the WordPress blocks, specifically image block, paragraph block, heading block, or button block as of WordPress 6.5. So you can take those, there's specific attributes like the URL for the image or the content for the paragraph, and you can dynamically generate the attribute for the block. And we're gonna dive into some examples. The image block is just it's one that immediately comes to mind. All right, but yeah, the biggest thing I want to say to start with is everything I'm showing is being done from within a theme. You can also do these things from a plugin, but I'm someone who kind of lives in the theme world, and so I tend to think of how can I use these block bindings with things like patterns, templates, the pieces that make up your front end of your website. All right, so the block bindings API supports what's called binding sources. Now, by default, WordPress has one binding source that it ships in WordPress 6.5, and that is for post meta or custom fields. And that's primarily what we'll talk about today, is how to use this new API with the default custom fields binding source. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen because I want to show, let me see. All right, let me have to move my browser just a second. I want to show just a couple of custom binding sources. These do not use custom fields. They use things I've registered by my theme. We won't get into the code of these. I just want to show you like just some basic possibilities. So the first thing, if you see what I'm highlighting, page 1 of 5 and my pagination block, that is actually dynamically generated as technically a paragraph block. If we just inspect it really quickly, well, you'll see I have a custom class, but that's a block binding, and it's registered through my theme. Another thing I have this footer credit random thing called, I says, powered by peace and understanding. That's just a randomly generated string, also a custom binding. And they can get really simple, or they can be far more complex. I do want to show off one other binding. If I can look at my templates, and I have what I have. Wow, this is going. My editor's loading slowly. All right. And I just realized I had Gutenberg installed too, so I don't even know how to view my attachment template. This is something that's not in WordPress 6.5. All right, how about I just search? We're looking at stuff that's not even in WordPress yet because I forgot. All right, media image, there we go. So like for attachment templates, like image attachment, I have like this image, like if I view an image on the front end, it's connected to dynamic data. And I have all these, it's not the prettiest UI. These are all custom, it says custom fields, but they're connected to custom data. And we'll just look at really quickly. I do have an image, there we go. So on the front end, this image is dynamically generated based on the attachment page, and all of this like image data, like, the camera, the aperture, focal length, all of that it's just dynamic thing. They're dynamic things that are generated without having to write a custom block. I didn't want to focus too much on custom bindings. I just wanted to show a couple of really quick, ideas for things that I'm using at the moment. But we will get into the actual demo of what we're talking about today, which is a boat review website. And this is going to use custom fields. And eventually what we'll do is we're going to take these custom fields and we're going to integrate them with things like block variations, the query loop block, patterns, and templates. Because it's one thing to, just create a custom field and, create a block binding on top of it. But what do you do after that? How do you use it in your themes or even in your plugins? I see we have, I don't know, we have any things to come up in the chat really quick before I start diving into?
No, we're good. I'm just littering the chat with links.
Oh, okay. All right. All right. Yeah. So I really like books. Hit me up on Goodreads this year if you like. My goal is to read 50 books for the year. So I created a book review website. I wanted to have a playground link available for this, but we ran into a few problems. But that's okay. You can use the links that Nick is sharing to create your own, your own demo of this. And there is a XML file with the content as well. All right. I just want to show what this is doing really quickly. So each book here is a book review. As you can see, we have, a title. I'm actually looking at 5-star reviews. We ain't to that yet. So this homepage. We have like the author and the review here. And let's look at Emma by Jane Austen. You can also see we have other data like 5 stars, 477 pages, the author, and there's a link to Goodreads. And let's look, if we look at the edit post screen, you'll see we have all this data is generated in the, you can input it in the sidebar. And like, say if we just change the total number of pages, it is in the sidebar. It also updates in the content area. All of these things are block bindings. These 4 fields. And yeah, so we'll go back to the front end. This is what we're doing today. We're going to walk through how I built this. And let me see, I'm just looking over my notes, sorry. To begin any project with block bindings and custom fields, the first thing you have to do is actually register custom fields. I don't know how much of our audience has registered custom fields before, or you're probably familiar with plugins like ACF. There's several metabox plugins or metadata plugins. I imagine most of them will allow you to register these fields without going into code. But if you're like me, you'll just dive into your themes functions.php, or you'll put it in a plugin file depending on the project you're building. So to register custom fields, we're going to hook into the init action and with a custom function, and we're just going to call register meta. This is a pretty straightforward function to use. You're just plugging in the values you need. But when you're going to use them with the block editor and with block bindings, there's some very important steps you need to take. Very first one is when you register your field, you need to make sure it's shown in the REST API via the REST API, because that's how the block editor works. So that data needs to be available through that API. You also want to make sure single is set to true, because at this point we're not dealing with multiple values for single key. That's not supported at the moment. So we do definitely want to just deal with meta values that are just single values. Beyond that, those pretty much have to be set, but beyond that, it just depends on the data. So I've registered 4 custom fields. I prefixed them with theme slug. We have book author, rating, length, which is the number of pages of a book, and a Goodreads URL. One thing you may have noticed, if you're really looking really closely, is I have 2 meta values or meta keys here, book rating and book length. Those are actually supposed to be integers. But I had to make them strings for them to work correctly with the block bindings API. It's a bit of a hack, and I don't know if my solution that I will be showing throughout this session is the ideal one, because when we get to the JavaScript side of this, we're going to have to do a little trickery to make sure the string is shown in the editor and the integer is shown in the control. It's not really complex, but it's more hacky than I would like. The reason for this is we're binding these things to paragraph blocks, and the paragraph block, or specifically the paragraph block's content attribute, and that must be have the type of a string. And these are integers because they're numbers. So just watch out for that if you run into similar situations in the editor. But yeah, you got to register your meta to start with. And that's pretty much how you get started. You don't have to actually register bindings when you're working with custom fields, because this is a built-in binding source from core. But let's look at the block markup of an actual binding in the editor. It's worth noting that that there is no UI for inserting block bindings, and we'll get to that, actually doing that in a minute. To add a binding to a post, you actually have to do add this bit of code. I'm trying to copy it. You have to add the metadata attribute and the sub attribute of bindings, and then you have to define the attribute itself. For the paragraph block, it is the content attribute. And then nested one level deeper is the source, which is the core post meta source. And then you can define any number of arguments for custom fields or post meta. It only accepts a key, and this specific thing we're looking at is the book rating. So the meta that we registered earlier, theme select book rating, is what we enter here. That is a lot to remember to type manually. And I've broken that at least a dozen times. Trying to type this in the editor or even in my, VS Code or something is always missing a bracket, and there's quite a few of them. So I don't recommend that method. And I definitely do not recommend asking your end users, your clients, your users, to go into the code editor and do that. So how do we get around this problem? Well, we use the block variations API. And I will actually show you, so book, as you can see, I have what looks like a bunch of custom blocks here: book author, book length, book rating, And apparently I don't see my Goodreads one, but that's okay. So if we enter, where did I enter? I think it went to the bottom. Yeah, it went to the bottom of the post. All right. So that is actually a block variation of on the paragraph block. So, and you see I have a custom title and description defined for it, but everything else is pretty much the same. And if we look in, if we open the post panel and are inside the book review controls I have, you'll see that anything I add here, Jane Austen, and just, it does automatically update. So that works. And let's go ahead and delete that. But yeah, each one of these bindings I have are also registered as block variations. And that makes them really easier to insert because, as you see, we have all of these variations registered in the normal inserter. I don't know where my Goodreads one is. I may have not registered. I may have hidden it from the inserter. If you're unfamiliar with how to register block variations, we have a great tutorial on the developer blog, and there's good documentation in the block editor handbook. But we'll start looking at code. All right. I will assume you already know how to work with WordPress scripts. There's documentation in the theme handbook of how to set this up, define your Webpack config. So I won't dive into that because that's a totally different subject. So I am loading a variations.js file, and I have a few dependencies set, and I get an icon for my Goodreads variation. All right. For registering variations, we need to call the register block variation function. And most of this, these things are all covered in, the handbook. You just enter in a name, title, description, and so on. Just basic, really, you're inputting basic values. The big thing here for this presentation is how do we integrate block variations with block bindings? If you remember, if we look back at the code editor, at all of this stuff you had to enter in the code editor. We don't want to have to do that. So what we do is we actually register that metadata and or add that metadata via the registered variation. So we have a book author variation here. And so we're going to actually add the binding within the variation itself. So it's much easier to read, and you only have to do it once, and you can insert it at any point. Big thing I do want to mention, when you're using the paragraph or heading block, also use the placeholder. In the case of, let's say we removed Jane Austen, you said in the left here, you said it says book author. That's actually the placeholder attribute. And that just gives the user like some sort of visual, like, hey, this is what this is. And there are other clues, like you have the purple outline, and there's a little link thing in the toolbar, which is broken when you use top toolbar. But all right, so that's what the placeholder does, is just give you like a fallback there if nothing is shown. And I like doing that with the paragraph and heading block, which both should support that attribute. Just a quick, tip as you're building variations with block bindings. The most complex thing here is figuring out the is active check. So is active checks if a variation is currently in use. So like when like the book author again is a variation of the paragraph block. So when it's selected, it actually shows, the book author and description, all the neat stuff. So we need a way to know that's this variation of the paragraph block. And we do that by actually checking um, this big old this big old check, which is essentially checking these attributes we've already set. We're specifically checking if theme slug book author is the key. And you could also check for against source as well, but I don't think it was necessary. So yeah, for this, I registered 4 variations. We don't need to walk through each one. The code is basically the same for each. The only change is essentially the key and the variation name and specific details. But the code itself works for everything. All right, just checking our time. We're already in half an hour. Are there questions about how we're doing this variations here before we move on?
No questions yet. We're answering some of them in the chat, so I think you're good to move forward.
Okay. Yeah, I can't see the chat, so I'm assuming y'all are taking care of things there. All right. Beyond variations. All right. So what the next step? Variations are cool because they allow easy insertion. But how do you still have to have a way for users to input data? Now the default would be to turn on ask them to turn on custom fields and add all this stuff manually. And that also is not a great solution for your everyday user or your clients or whoever you may be dealing with. I mean, it is a possible solution, but it's not very ideal, and it's easy to mess up. Like there's no it's easy to mess up like what type of data you're putting in and get things, a typo just messes things up. So we want to build something that's much nicer, that's visually pleasing, really easy to use. So if we look over in the sidebar, you see I have a book review sidebar panel. Beneath it, we have input fields that are associated with each of our custom meta fields. So we have a rating, an author, total pages, and Goodreads URL. And these are using using core components built through JavaScript. And we're going to kind of dive into how you can build these. And I will actually, hopefully in the next couple of weeks, I'll have a tutorial on the developer blog that dives more specifically in the code. But feel free to check out those initial links to the repository to also see how, like, really play around with this and, try things, tinker, break it, whatever you want to do. All right. So look at the meta file. All right. This, does require JavaScript. And as usual, we're importing a bunch of stuff. Oh yeah, I almost forgot, Nick. One of the things before I dive into code, one of the things we're wanting to do is get people to move away from using custom meta boxes. Like you're probably familiar with registering meta boxes in classic WordPress. They still work in the block editor. There's a ticket where meta boxes will eventually be moved into a toggle, so they will be hidden, but they'll, users have to toggle them on and off. That may be ideal for some scenarios, but it won't be ideal for others. So just outside of this discussion on block bindings, we really encourage you to start moving meta input into custom components in the editor. Nick, who's here with us today, and Ryan Welcher will be presenting more in-depth solutions around these custom components and so on in the next developer hours. So I highly encourage you to watch that. And this is just a little taste of what's to come. All right, so going back to where I was, so we're importing a few things, and as you can see, I am using a few experimental components. Hopefully by WordPress 6.6, we will have more of these marked as stable. That is something I know Nick and I both have asked for. We're trying to really push to make sure these components are listed as stable so you feel comfortable using them for your projects. I use them all the time, even though they're experimental. And so, but use at your own risk. You can always also, if there's a experimental component like input control, which is basic text input, you can also build a custom component if you're not comfortable using experimental components from core. So one thing we're going to do is we're going to use register plugin. This is kind of a catch-all function to do a lot of things, really. We're not technically registering an actual plugin. It's like a sidebar plugin in the editor. Specifically, we're going to use the its render callback to just render something on the screen. And that something, if you remember, is this panel on the right. We're going to use a couple of hooks. The first is useLect. What we're doing here is we're just checking the core editor store and determining what the current post type is. And if you look down here, we get the post type, and then we'll check if we're not looking at the post type. And for this specific bolt review website, we're just using posts. We're going to return there. The other thing we need to do is use entity prop to both get meta and set meta. Really cool one-liner, and that's really going to power our custom input fields. Beyond that, we're just going to create a custom document settings panel. I'm also using experimental VStack, which is just stacks, makes the layout a little nicer. And then we have four different components from core that we're using. We're using a range control. If you recall, this is range control, and we're using text input, and we're using a number input and another text input. All right. This is the part where I mentioned earlier about using strings versus integers. The paragraph block is going to require a string for its content, and that's what we're mostly using. But a rating is actually an integer, and the range control is, in this case, is going to expect an integer. So I had to do a little trickery, and the value I'm parsing as an int, or parsing as an integer, what is actually a string value. And when the value's changed, the range control is giving back an integer, so I'm passing it as a string here if there's a value. Yeah, that's the kind of hack we're doing here. And hopefully we can solve some of this in core so we can, some of these data type issues for these specific cases. If not, they're not really that hard to solve. And there are probably other ways to go about this. But I don't want to linger too long on the specifics of that. Do we? I feel like I like like registering and made it. We're at 95 lines of code to do 4 controls. Um, it's not overly complicated. It's mostly things you can copy and paste. One of my favorite tools to do this is I use Storybook. Um, and like you can just what was looking at the range control. So you can uh-oh, I have no idea what happened. I think we had an error. I won't I'm not gonna look at the Storybook site for long, but I use Storybook to just basically copy and paste controls. And yeah, we got something going on there. Um, and that's how I build a lot of these. And I kind of use it as a really quick reference to see what values are available for a specific control. Um, and yeah, that's the developer cheat for the day. Copy and paste things. Um, all right. Let's see. Were there like any specific questions about like registering a plugin or component there and how that works?
We answered some questions, and I do think it's to stress that like we will go into greater detail in the next session about that sidebar panel and other things like that. Um, it's not terribly challenging, but there are some nuances to it, as Justin
Mhm.
alluded to. Um,
Yeah. Yeah. The biggest thing I wanted to point out with that was kind of the dealing with the integer versus string value and how I dealt with it in this specific situation. I'm hoping I come up with a better solution in the future. Um, but yeah, I think I tore my hair out just about for like 4 hours or so trying to figure out why is this not working, and until one of our colleagues pointed out, hey, I ran into this problem before. Um, and that's a good reason to always ask instead of trying to do things on your own. All right, let's go ahead and quickly look at some other things like where I've taken block bindings. So we've learned about variations. We've learned about how to build some user inputs. Also in WordPress 6.6, we should start seeing some more UI things for custom field input. I'm not sure how far along that's going to go, but stay tuned. We do have a couple of tracking tickets for the future that we'll share as well. But let's go into like querying post. You want to actually be able to get your posts by this custom data, right? For example, we have, as you remember, you were able to give a star rating. What use is custom, metadata if you can't actually do cool things with like query? So we've seen that Emma by Jane Austen has 5 stars, and we can look at all of our 5-star reviews now. And which we gave that to The Great Gatsby. I'm not sure if it deserves 5 stars, but Emma and Little Women, all great classic books. And what we're looking at here is a custom page with technically a custom pattern within the page. And what I've also done is I have created custom controls for the query loop block. And actually it's just one control, and it's the ability to choose a rating, query your post by whatever the rating is. So we have 4 stars and 3 stars. And let's look at 1 star. There are no books with 1 stars. And this panel, similar to meta boxes, the meta input fields, I have a tutorial on the developer blog that dives into this fully. So I don't want to spend much time. What you'll get on the developer blog is a tutorial on how to build a query loop variation. What I've done is I've simplified that just because this is a book review website only. It is, I didn't make a variation. I'm just adding these controls to every query loop block. And just because I don't want us to run out of time, I'll just scan over this code really quickly. I just made a custom component here that has a book review and a rating selector. And that's saved on the block level. And to get it in there, I filtered editor.blockEdit and checked that it's the core query block. The important thing is here that that we're taking like the next step with block bindings. We've defined some custom fields. We've bound them to some blocks, and we've registered some variations on top of them. What do we do next? We added some input fields, and now we're taking it even further, and we're displaying this on the front end, in a grid, and we're also showing that metadata on the front end. And these are all done, like if we look at the, say the author again, this is our variation within, so this is a pattern within, a variation within a pattern. And so we're kind of taking all these pieces and connecting them. Let me see. But I really encourage, if you don't want to walk through the entire tutorial of the bolt review grid, the grid variation thing for the query loop block, feel free to use the advanced query loop plugin by Ryan Welcher. It should allow you to query, by any meta that you want to do without having to write any custom code at all for that part. Okay, I'm gonna just quickly touch on, I did mention that we were using patterns for these various things. And I do encourage a lot of use of patterns in your themes. My favorite pattern was how we're actually kind of started. This is a book review card. We just registered it as you would any pattern. And that is what you see here. So we can actually take this if we want to. Registered category. And so you just, the user can insert that pattern directly into their post. That just pulls the featured image, and they can add a quote. And of course, all of the bindings data here is generated from the meta input fields. Okay, and also the other things, the front page template here and the 5-star reviews we looked at, all of these are also just patterns I created directly from the editor, copied in, pasted, gave them a title and slug. Of course, if you look directly in here, you can see the actual, block binding use and within the patterns. And to take that one step further, I also use the patterns within the templates themselves. So if we look at the home page, our home template, you can see I used the pattern to pull in. I mean, the template pulls in the grid review pattern. All right. Yeah, I know we got like 15 minutes. So I'm just trying to scan over that really quickly. Um, all right. We do. Nick, have you linked to the tracking issues for the upcoming stuff?
I have not, but I can. Actually,
Okay.
Greg linked to one of them, but I'll link them right now. We did have one question which I do not know the answer to, so maybe you
Okay.
do. Um, can you see the chat, or would you like me to read it out?
Where is my chat?
I'll read it out so in case people are
Okay.
watching later. It
Okay.
says from Chris Young says, can one in theory set two bindings on one block? So if I had two sibling filters on a query loop, like the one in the block, rating selector, and say an author, and have two be able to talk to each other so that they filter their own values. Basically, can you have two bindings talking to a single block? You know?
Okay. All right. So first of all, yes, you can absolutely have multiple bindings on a block, but okay, let me look at actually let me pull up the it'll be easier to look in my VS code. Um, all right, so let's actually if we look at the metadata here, so you see bindings is actually an object that takes a key of the like what if we look at this is why I don't want to do this in code actually, but like if we look at here, we see we can define we could define, since it's an object, you can define multiple values for it. So this is a content value. What you can't do is as far as I know, you can't define multiple bindings for one attribute, but you can define multiple bindings for different attributes. Now, the paragraph block specifically only supports the content attribute as of WordPress 6.6. I'm trying to think. I wish I had an example of an image at the moment
Mm-hmm. Or a
because it has more.
button.
Yeah, a button. I do have an example of a button. A button, I forget, it's the URL. Um, yeah, so yeah, it's the URL and maybe the target, and there's a couple of others. Like you can define bindings for each one of the supported attributes.
Yeah, so
Image, yeah, images, alt text, and URL button. I think uh, is
button
your
currently supports URL, text, link target, and rel. Paragraph is just content, heading is just content, and an image is URL, alt, and title. So
yeah. So yeah, you can have multiple bindings. I felt like there was maybe a second part I didn't quite get from the question, like you had something about talking together or something, or maybe that covered it. Um,
yeah, I think that, like I said, it's choosing one sibling filter on the front end that only displays 5 stars, and then another sibling filter that adjusts on the fly to only display Fitzgerald, Austin, or Alco. Yeah, I'm not entirely sure, Chris, if that's possible. I think you need to have two separate blocks for that. But with the supported attributes, you can have a binding for each supported attribute. But declaring multiple bindings for the same attribute, I haven't tried it, but I assume that the last one will take precedent, but I'm not sure.
um, yeah, well, one thing I think once you kind of get into like the really complex, uh, more complex things, beyond like, so we're dealing with like custom fields, which are very defined in how you use them. But if we start looking at things like I have like custom bindings, you can do all kinds of things with custom bindings. There's really no limit. And I have several of them here. I'm trying to think of a good, here's one that displays "Hello Dolly," you know. But you know, you can when you're registering custom bindings, you can do like your code can do whatever you want it to. There's a bound pagination label. Like I even have one that shows like comment parent link. Um, I didn't show that. That would have been a great one to show off. um, Kit because it's something that would have normally been a custom block. And I'm trying to think of a post where I have comments on them now. I think this one has comments. This is looking at my theme demo. Yeah, so this is a custom binding here. It doesn't use custom fields. It uses the theme is generating the dynamic data. So it's linked once you get beyond like, okay, this 2 levels deep, it just starts outputting a link to the parent. So you don't have like crazy nesting, and there's a little CSS involved with that too. But there's just anything you want to do, you can do it with custom bindings. And maybe we should have a presentation just on custom bindings in the future. But yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I just saying I shared your article a few times in there about custom bindings, and I think
Yeah,
that, like you said, you can do a lot with custom bindings, and hopefully, what you showed today gives people all sorts of ideas, and they can go create custom bindings for those.
yeah, definitely. And all right, we have about 7 minutes left. What else do we have? I'm just scanning through. I see we got there's a lot of chat here, but seeing a lot of answers too.
I'm going to share one more time the tracking issues for kind of the next phase of block bindings. Again, so those are in there for people to check out.
Yeah, and I expect that we're going over time, that we're going to have more controls within the UI, especially around custom fields. They're going to allow end users to enter like this custom data, and some of this stuff we've showed today, it might even be irrelevant. Uh, hopefully there will be a day where we don't have to code like these fields in the sidebar. It just we register a few things and WordPress knows what to do with it. That's a really exciting thought. And we have a long ways to go before I think we fully realize the potential of what the block bindings API can do. Um, I think the best thing to do now is just like start exploring on your own, and playing around with things and break. I always say just break things until you figure out how they work. All right. Okay.
Yeah, I did. I want to mention one thing is that, like,
Okay.
right now we mentioned that block bindings only works with a handful of blocks and a couple different attributes. And so
Hmm.
I think that there was a couple questions in there around like when will it be opened up to other blocks? And I think a lot of that comes down to what's needed, right? Because we opening up to every block doesn't necessarily make sense. So it's test out what's there and then find out where the walls are, and figure out like, oh, we really need it for the media and text block, or whatever. That will help kind of frame where it goes next, based on the needs of you all building things. This is definitely just a first step.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and when you do have a need, open a ticket, please. Go to the Gutenberg repository, open a ticket, explain your use case and why you need something, and that goes a lot farther in terms of like pushing to have a block or a specific attribute supported. Like because we don't know, the core developers don't know what you need until you let them know.
Yeah.
And All right. But yeah, I had a lot of fun with building this demo out, and I still have some more work to do before it becomes a developer blog post, and I will dive into everything in that post, and I will share all these links again in the post. I appreciate everyone who has joined us today. So I'm just looking, see if we had another question there, but I appreciate y'all coming out. Also, go if you have further questions after the show, go to the outreach channel on the Make WordPress Slack. I'll be happy to answer them. You can ping me directly also.
Absolutely. I'm posting your code one last time in case folks missed it. There it is. All right. Well, with that, thank you everybody for attending another, hopefully you found wonderful developer hour session. And we have the next one again is going to be about the meta boxes, alternatives to meta boxes. We have one in the works around the create block theme plugin. We tend to do a lot of, this was a bit more theme related. We tend to do a lot of plugin related things. So the next one is going to be later in May, end of May. It's going to be around the create block theme and things that you can do with that. But if you have any suggestions on things you'd like to see covered, please let us know. We're trying to create the most useful content for you all developers in the community. So thank you so much for attending, and we really hope to see you on the next one. Hope everyone has a great day.